Marcus wiped the sweat from his forehead as he pushed his cleaning cart down the pristine corridors of the Galactic Senate building. The massive structure housed representatives from across the known galaxy, and keeping it spotless was no small task. As one of the few humans employed in the building, Marcus had grown accustomed to the strange looks and whispered comments about his species. The Draconian Empire controlled nearly half the galaxy, and their representatives commanded respect wherever they went. Their scaled skin gleamed under the artificial lights, and their towering forms made even the tallest humans look small. Marcus had cleaned these halls for 3 years, invisible to most of the powerful beings who walked them daily. Today felt different, though. There was tension in the air that even a lowly janitor could sense. Hushed conversation stopped when Marcus approached, and several Draconian guards looked more agitated than usual. As he mopped near the main conference hall, he overheard fragments of urgent discussions about medical emergencies and failing treatments. Marcus paused his work when he saw Emperor Zarthok himself stride past, his massive form radiating barely controlled fury. The Dragon Emperor's golden scales, usually polished to perfection, seemed dull today. His serpentine eyes, typically cold and calculating, held something Marcus had never seen before in a Draconian leader: desperation. Behind the Emperor walked several smaller figures draped in medical robes. Marcus recognized them as the galaxy's most renowned healers, representatives from the Crystalline Collective, known for their advanced medical technology, and several ethereal beings whose energy-based healing was legendary. All of them looked defeated, their heads bowed as they struggled to keep pace with the Emperor's angry strides. Marcus continued cleaning, but his curiosity was piqued. In his 3 years here, he had never seen the Dragon Emperor look anything less than completely in control. The Draconian Empire was built on strength and dominance, and their leaders never showed weakness. Whatever was happening had to be serious enough to crack that iron composure. As the day progressed, Marcus noticed more unusual activity. Medical ships arrived at the Senate's private docking bay, their sleek forms bearing the markings of different galactic civilizations. Representatives from species known for their healing abilities hurried through the corridors, all heading toward the restricted Imperial wing, where only the highest-ranking officials were allowed. During his lunch break, Marcus sat in the staff cafeteria with other service workers. The gossip was flying fast among the alien janitors, cooks, and maintenance staff. A tentacled Vorthon who worked in food service had overheard medical personnel discussing treatment failures. A mechanical being from the maintenance crew mentioned seeing quarantine equipment being rushed to the Imperial quarters. "Something's wrong with the young prince," whispered Kayla, a blue-skinned Aquarian who cleaned the upper levels. "I saw him being carried through the medical bay yesterday. He looked terrible, not moving at all." Marcus felt a strange pang in his chest. He had occasionally glimpsed the young Prince Zeltar during official ceremonies. Unlike his imposing father, the prince was smaller, more curious about the world around him. Marcus had even caught the young Draconian watching him work once, those large golden eyes filled with innocent wonder, rather than the typical Draconian arrogance. The afternoon brought even more commotion. Marcus was cleaning near the medical wing when he heard raised voices echoing from behind the heavy security doors. The Emperor's roar of frustration was unmistakable, followed by the measured tones of what sounded like medical professionals trying to explain something difficult. "Impossible," the Emperor's voice boomed. "There must be something that can help him. I will not accept that the greatest healers in the galaxy cannot cure a simple illness." Marcus pressed closer to the ventilation grate he was supposedly cleaning, straining to hear more. A calm voice, probably one of the crystalline healers, responded with clinical precision. "Your Majesty, we have exhausted all conventional treatments. The prince's condition is unlike anything in our medical databases. His cellular structure is rejecting every therapy we attempt. Without understanding the root cause, we cannot develop an effective treatment." The Emperor's response was a wordless roar of rage that made the walls vibrate. Marcus heard heavy footsteps pacing back and forth, then the sound of something being thrown across the room. When the Emperor spoke again, his voice was lower but filled with deadly promise. "Then find someone who can help him. I don't care what species they are or what methods they use. Bring me healers from the Outer Rim, shamans from primitive worlds, anyone with knowledge of medicine. My son will not die while I rule this empire." Marcus felt his heart racing as he realized what he was hearing. The Dragon Emperor, the most powerful being in the known galaxy, was facing something his immense power couldn't fix. His child was dying, and all the advanced medical technology and healing abilities of the galaxy's greatest civilizations had failed. As Marcus continued his cleaning duties, his mind wandered to his own childhood on Earth. He remembered his grandmother, a country doctor who had treated patients with a combination of modern medicine and old folk remedies. She had always said that sometimes the simplest solutions came from the most unexpected places. That evening, as Marcus prepared to leave the Senate building, he found himself taking a detour past the medical wing. Through a small observation window, he caught a glimpse of the young prince lying motionless on a medical bed. The sight hit him harder than he expected. This wasn't just the son of a galactic emperor. This was a sick child whose father was running out of hope. Marcus walked home through the crowded streets of the galactic capital, his mind churning with thoughts he couldn't quite organize. Around him, beings from hundreds of species went about their daily lives, unaware that somewhere above them, a desperate father was watching his son slowly fade away despite having access to the most advanced medical care in the universe. Marcus arrived at work the next morning to find the Senate building in chaos. Medical personnel rushed through the corridors carrying equipment he didn't recognize, while security guards directed traffic with grim efficiency. The usual dignified pace of galactic politics had been replaced by the urgent rhythm of a medical emergency. As he began his morning cleaning routine, Marcus overheard conversations that painted a dire picture. The prince's condition had worsened overnight, and several more medical teams had arrived from distant systems. Each group brought their own theories and treatments, but none had succeeded in even slowing the progression of the mysterious illness. Marcus was mopping near the main information desk when he saw a group of ethereal healers emerge from the medical wing, their translucent forms flickering with distress. One of them was speaking in rapid musical tones to a crystalline medic whose geometric body was pulsing with agitated light patterns. "The energy readings make no sense," the ethereal was saying. "His life force is being drained by something we cannot identify or counteract. It's as if his very essence is being consumed from within." The crystalline medic responded with a sound like chiming crystals. "Our molecular scanners detect cellular breakdown at an unprecedented rate. Every treatment we apply is neutralized within hours. This is beyond our current understanding of biology." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. These were beings whose medical knowledge spanned millennia, whose healing abilities were considered miraculous by most species. If they were admitting defeat, the situation was truly hopeless. Throughout the morning, Marcus watched as more specialists arrived. There were hive-mind medics whose collective consciousness could diagnose conditions no individual could understand. Ancient beings from the galactic core brought treatments that had saved countless lives across the ages. Even representatives from machine civilizations arrived with their most advanced medical AI systems. Each group was granted immediate access to the prince, and each group emerged hours later with the same defeated expressions. Marcus began to understand that he was witnessing something unprecedented, a medical mystery that had stumped every advanced civilization in the galaxy. During his lunch break, Marcus sat alone in the cafeteria, picking at his food while his mind raced. He thought about his grandmother again, remembering how she had often succeeded where big city doctors had failed. She had always said that sometimes you had to look at a problem differently, approach it from an angle that others hadn't considered. As he walked back to work, Marcus made a decision that surprised even him. Instead of returning to his cleaning duties, he made his way toward the medical wing. His human clearance badge wouldn't get him into the restricted areas, but he knew the building's service passages better than anyone. Using a maintenance tunnel that ran behind the medical wing, Marcus was able to position himself near a ventilation grate that provided both audio and visual access to the prince's room. What he saw made his heart sink. The young Draconian lay motionless on a biobed surrounded by monitoring equipment that flashed with warning signals. His golden scales had faded to a sickly yellow-green, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Emperor Zarthok stood beside the bed, his massive form somehow diminished by grief and helplessness. The great ruler who commanded starfleets and controlled the fates of billions was reduced to a father watching his child slip away. Around him, medical personnel from a dozen species worked frantically, but their movements had the desperate quality of people who had run out of options. "How long?" the Emperor asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. A crystalline healer responded with gentle, chiming tones. At the current rate of deterioration, perhaps 2 days, Your Majesty. We are deeply sorry. We have exhausted every treatment protocol in our databases. The Emperor closed his eyes, and for a moment his perfect composure cracked completely. Marcus saw something he would never have believed possible. The Dragon Emperor's shoulders shook with suppressed emotion. When he opened his eyes again, they blazed with desperate determination. No, he said firmly. There has to be something else. Some treatment we haven't tried. Some healer we haven't consulted. I will not accept this. One of the ethereal healers stepped forward, its form shimmering with sympathetic energy. Your Majesty, we have consulted every major medical database in the galaxy. We have tried treatments from the most advanced civilizations and healing techniques from the most ancient cultures. The prince's condition appears to be unique, possibly caused by an unknown pathogen or genetic anomaly. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as an idea began to form in his mind. The healers had tried treatments from advanced civilizations and ancient cultures, but had they considered something much simpler, something so basic that it might be overlooked by beings accustomed to complex high-tech solutions? He thought about his grandmother's medical philosophy, that sometimes the most effective treatments were the ones that worked with the body's natural healing processes rather than fighting against them. Earth medicine had developed differently from other species, focusing on supporting the immune system rather than replacing it with external interventions. As Marcus watched the frantic medical activity, he noticed something that the alien healers might not recognize. The prince's symptoms reminded him of cases his grandmother had described. Severe dehydration combined with what looked like immune system collapse. On Earth, such conditions were often caused by simple bacterial infections that could be treated with basic antibiotics and supportive care. The more Marcus observed, the more convinced he became that everyone was overthinking the problem. The galaxy's most advanced medical minds were searching for complex solutions to what might be a relatively simple condition. But how could a human janitor convince the Dragon Emperor and his medical team to consider such a basic approach? Marcus knew that what he was contemplating was beyond audacious. It was potentially suicidal. Humans had no standing in galactic medicine, and suggesting that he knew better than the galaxy's finest healers would likely be seen as an insult, punishable by death. But as he watched the young prince struggle for each breath, Marcus realized he couldn't live with himself if he didn't at least try. The question was how to approach the situation without getting himself killed in the process. He needed to find a way to present his ideas that wouldn't immediately result in his execution for presumption. As he crawled back through the maintenance tunnel, Marcus began formulating a plan that was either brilliantly simple or simply brilliant in its potential for getting him killed. Marcus spent the rest of his shift wrestling with his decision. Every rational part of his mind told him to stay out of it, to continue cleaning floors and let the galaxy's experts handle the medical crisis. But every time he passed the medical wing and heard the increasingly desperate discussions, his resolve strengthened. That evening, Marcus didn't go home. Instead, he made his way to the building's communication center and used his basic access privileges to research everything he could about draconian physiology. What he discovered made his heart race with possibility. Despite their alien appearance, draconians shared surprising biological similarities with humans. Their immune systems, respiratory functions, and cellular structures operated on principles that Earth doctors would recognize. More importantly, Marcus found records of previous medical emergencies involving draconians that had been successfully treated using what the galactic medical community considered primitive Earth techniques. The records were buried deep in historical files, dismissed as statistical anomalies by most researchers, but they painted a clear picture. Sometimes simple Earth medicine worked where advanced galactic treatments failed. Marcus printed out everything he could find and spent the night studying in a supply closet, using his cleaning duties as cover. By morning, he had assembled a compelling case that the prince's symptoms matched several conditions that Earth medicine could treat effectively. The key was convincing someone to listen to him. His opportunity came sooner than expected. As Marcus began his morning rounds, he encountered a scene of barely controlled panic in the medical wing. The prince's condition had deteriorated further overnight, and the assembled healers were running out of time. Marcus watched through the observation window as Emperor Zarthok paced like a caged predator. his fury and desperation filling the room with dangerous energy. "There must be something else," the Emperor roared at the gathered medical team. "Some treatment we haven't considered, some approach we haven't tried. I refuse to believe that with all the knowledge in this galaxy, my son cannot be saved." Dr. Vexhai, the lead crystalline healer, responded with musical chimes that conveyed deep regret. "Your Majesty, we have exhausted every option in our combined medical databases. We have consulted with healing traditions from over 200 species. Unless we can identify the exact cause of the prince's condition, we cannot develop an effective treatment." Marcus took a deep breath and made the most important decision of his life. He walked directly to the medical wing's security checkpoint, where two massive draconian guards blocked access to the restricted area. Their golden eyes fixed on him with the kind of attention that usually preceded violence. "I need to speak with the Emperor," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "I have information about the prince's condition." The larger guard's lip curled in what might have been amusement. "A human cleaning servant wishes to address His Imperial Majesty? You will return to your duties before I decide you are being deliberately insulting." Marcus pulled out the research he had compiled, holding it where the guards could see. "I've been studying draconian physiology all night. The prince's symptoms match several conditions that my species has successfully treated." The Emperor said he wanted to hear from anyone who might help his son. The second guard looked at the papers with obvious skepticism, but something in Marcus's tone must have registered. After a moment of silent communication between the guards, the larger one activated his communication device. "Medical wing security to His Majesty. We have a human service worker claiming to have medical information relevant to the prince's condition. He requests an audience." The response came back immediately, the Emperor's voice crackling with barely restrained violence. "Send him away before I have him executed for wasting my time." But Dr. Vexhai's crystalline voice cut through the comm channel. "Your Majesty, we agreed to consider any potential source of assistance. Perhaps we should hear what he has to say." There was a long pause before the Emperor's voice returned, colder than the vacuum of space. "Bring him here. But if this is some pathetic attempt at attention-seeking, he will not live to regret it." The guards escorted Marcus through corridors he had only seen through maintenance passages. The medical wing's main treatment room was larger than he had realized, filled with equipment from dozens of different species. The assembled healers turned to stare at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright disdain. Emperor Zarthok dominated the room, his towering form radiating lethal anger, his golden eyes fixed on Marcus with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. When he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of someone accustomed to instant obedience. "You claim to have knowledge that the galaxy's finest medical minds lack? Explain yourself quickly, human, before I decide that your presumption deserves immediate punishment." Marcus felt his knees threaten to buckle under the weight of the Emperor's attention, but the sight of the unconscious prince on the medical bed strengthened his resolve. He held up his research with hands that barely trembled. "Your Majesty, I've spent the night studying everything I could find about draconian physiology and the prince's symptoms. I believe his condition matches several illnesses that my species has successfully treated, using relatively simple methods." A ripple of dismissive sounds came from the assembled healers. One of the ethereal beings spoke in musical tones that conveyed clear skepticism. "Human medicine is considered primitive by galactic standards. What could your species possibly know that we do not?" Marcus had expected this reaction, and he was ready for it. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the correct one. The prince's symptoms, the cellular breakdown, the immune system failure, the energy drain, they match patterns that Earth doctors have seen in cases of severe bacterial infection combined with dehydration and electrolyte imbalance. Dr. Vexhai's crystalline form pulsed with analytical light. "We have tested for all known pathogens. Our scans show no bacterial presence. Have you tested for Earth-based bacteria?" Marcus asked. "My research shows that draconian immune systems aren't naturally equipped to recognize certain bacterial strains that are common in human environments. If the prince was exposed to such bacteria, his body might not mount an effective immune response." The room fell silent as the implications of Marcus's words sank in. Emperor Zarthok's eyes narrowed to glowing slits as he processed what the human was suggesting. "You believe my son's condition is caused by human bacteria? How would such exposure occur?" Marcus swallowed hard. knowing his next words could seal his fate. "I work throughout this building every day, Your Majesty. If I was carrying bacteria that draconian immune systems couldn't recognize, and if the prince came into contact with surfaces I had cleaned." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees as the Emperor's rage reached dangerous levels. Marcus braced himself for immediate execution, but Dr. Vexhi's intervention saved his life. "Your Majesty, this theory has merit. We should test the prince for human bacterial strains immediately. If the human is correct, we may finally have identified the cause of the illness." The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Dr. Vexhi immediately ordered comprehensive tests for human bacterial strains, while other medical teams scrambled to recalibrate their equipment for pathogens they had never considered relevant to draconian physiology. Marcus found himself under virtual house arrest, surrounded by guards who watched his every move while the tests proceeded. Emperor Zarthok had said nothing since Marcus's revelation, but his presence filled the room like a gathering storm. The great ruler stood motionless beside his son's bed, his golden eyes never leaving the monitoring equipment that tracked the prince's failing vital signs. Every beep of the machine seemed to echo with the weight of an empire's future. Marcus tried to remain calm as he waited for the test results, but his mind raced with doubts. What if he was wrong? What if his grandmother's simple approach to medicine didn't apply to alien physiology? The Emperor had made it clear that failure would result in immediate execution, and Marcus was beginning to understand the full magnitude of what he had undertaken. Dr. Vexhi worked with mechanical precision, running tests that Marcus didn't fully understand but recognized as far more sophisticated than anything available on Earth. The crystalline healer's geometric form pulsed with focused energy as data streams flowed through crystalline neural networks that processed information at incomprehensible speeds. Other medical teams continued their own treatments, unwilling to abandon their efforts based on the theories of a human janitor. Marcus watched ethereal healers channel energy into the prince's failing body, while machine intelligences ran probability calculations on thousands of potential remedies. Despite their skepticism about his ideas, none of them were willing to let the young draconian die while any option remained unexplored. 3 hours into the testing process, Dr. Vexhi's crystalline form suddenly blazed with brilliant light. The chiming sounds that emerged carried a tone of excitement that made everyone in the room stop what they were doing. "Your Majesty," the healer announced, "we have identified the pathogen. The prince is indeed infected with a strain of bacteria commonly found in human environments, specifically, a variant of Streptococcus pyogenes that has adapted to the unique atmospheric conditions of this building." Emperor Zarthok's head snapped toward the healer, his eyes blazing with desperate hope. "Can it be treated?" Marcus felt his heart pounding as all eyes turned to him. This was the moment of truth. Either his grandmother's simple medical wisdom would save a prince, or he had just confirmed his own death sentence. On Earth, this type of infection responds well to specific antibiotics combined with supportive care, Marcus said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. "The key is rehydration, electrolyte balance, and giving the patient's natural immune system the support it needs to fight the infection." Dr. Vexhi's analysis continued as streams of data flowed through the healer's crystalline consciousness. "The human's assessment appears correct. Our advanced treatments have been fighting the wrong battle. We have been trying to replace the prince's immune system rather than supporting it. This bacterial strain requires a delicate approach that works with natural healing processes." One of the ethereal healers shimmered with what Marcus was learning to recognize as confusion. "But surely our energy-based treatments should be more effective than primitive chemical compounds." Marcus found himself in the surreal position of explaining Earth medicine to beings whose civilizations had mastered faster than light travel. Sometimes more advanced doesn't mean more effective. This particular bacteria has evolved alongside human immune systems for thousands of years. Earth antibiotics are specifically designed to target its vulnerabilities while supporting natural healing processes. Emperor Zarthok stepped forward, his massive form casting a shadow over Marcus. "Do you have access to these treatments? Can they be obtained quickly enough to save my son?" Marcus's mind raced as he considered the logistics. The basic antibiotics exist in any human medical facility, but they would need to be modified for draconian physiology. The dosage, delivery method, and supporting treatments would all need to be adjusted. Dr. Vexhai chimed with analytical precision. We can synthesize the required compounds and adjust them for optimal draconian compatibility. The question is whether the prince's condition has deteriorated beyond the point where such treatments can be effective. As if summoned by the healer's words, alarms began sounding from the prince's monitoring equipment. The young draconian's vital signs were dropping rapidly, his breathing becoming even more labored. Marcus watched in horror as the child he was trying to save slipped closer to death while they debated treatment options. How long to synthesize the antibiotics? The Emperor demanded, his voice cutting through the medical alarms like a blade. At least 6 hours for proper synthesis and testing, Dr. Vexhai replied, but based on current deterioration rates, the prince may not survive that long. Marcus felt desperation clawing at his chest as he watched the young prince struggle for each breath. His grandmother's voice echoed in his memory, reminding him that sometimes the best medicine was the simplest approach. An idea began forming in his mind, dangerous, unprecedented, but possibly the only chance they had. There might be another option, Marcus said quietly, his words cutting through the chaos like a whisper of hope. But it would require immediate action and complete trust in human medical principles. Every being in the room turned to stare at him, their alien features reflecting mixtures of desperation and skepticism. Emperor Zarthok's eyes narrowed to burning slits as he processed Marcus's words. Explain, the Emperor commanded, his voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who held the power of life and death. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that his next words would either save a prince or confirm his own execution. I have basic human antibiotics in my personal medical kit. Every human working in multi-species environments carries them. They're designed for human physiology. But if we adjust the dosage and combine them with aggressive supportive care, we might be able to stabilize the prince long enough for proper synthesis of draconian-specific treatments. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus could feel the weight of hundreds of years of galactic medical advancement pressing down on his simple suggestion. He was asking the most powerful beings in the galaxy to trust their dying prince to the primitive medicine of a species barely advanced enough for space. Travel Dr. Vexhai broke the silence with rapid chiming, sounds that conveyed urgent calculation. The risk is enormous. Human pharmaceuticals could kill the prince faster than the infection. He's dying anyway, Marcus replied, surprised by his own boldness. At this point, we have nothing to lose by trying. Emperor Zarthok looked down at his son's still form, then back at Marcus with eyes that seemed to peer into his very soul. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of absolute decision. Do it. The next 20 minutes became the longest of Marcus's life. Under Dr. Vexhai's guidance, he carefully extracted basic antibiotics from his personal medical kit, while the assembled healers worked frantically to calculate proper dosages for draconian physiology. The irony wasn't lost on him. The galaxy's most advanced medical minds were now dependent on a human janitor's first aid supplies. Marcus's hands shook as he prepared the injection, knowing that any mistake could kill the prince instantly. Dr. Vexhai had run the calculations through crystalline neural networks that processed data faster than any computer, but they were still working with incomplete information about how human pharmaceuticals would interact with draconian biology. The dosage must be precise, Dr. Vexhai chimed urgently. Too little and it will have no effect. Too much and we could cause immediate cardiac failure. Emperor Zarthok watched every movement with predatory intensity, his massive form coiled like a spring ready to strike. Marcus could feel the ruler's barely contained violence radiating through the room. If this treatment failed, the Emperor's grief would likely manifest as immediate, terrible vengeance. Marcus drew the antibiotic into the injection device with infinite care, double-checking the measurements against Dr. Vexhai's calculations. Around him, other medical teams prepared supportive treatments, intravenous fluids to combat dehydration, electrolyte solutions to restore balance, and monitoring equipment to track every aspect of the prince's response. Remember, Marcus said quietly as he approached the prince's bedside, this is just the first step. Earth medicine works slowly, supporting the body's natural healing processes rather than forcing immediate changes. We need to give his immune system time to respond. The young prince lay motionless on the biobed, his golden scales now a sickly gray-green that spoke of approaching death. His breathing was so shallow that Marcus had to watch carefully to detect any movement at all. This close he could see the family resemblance to the Emperor. The same strong jaw, the same noble bearing even in unconsciousness. Marcus positioned the injection device against the prince's neck, where Dr. Vexhai had identified the optimal injection site. "Here we go," he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. The antibiotic entered the prince's bloodstream with barely a whisper of sound from the injection device. For a moment nothing happened. The monitoring equipment continued its steady rhythm of warnings and alarms. The prince's vital signs remained critically low, and the assembled healers held their breath in collective anxiety. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, something began to change. The prince's breathing seemed to deepen slightly, and his color appeared marginally less gray. Dr. Vex's crystalline form pulsed with analyzing light as the healer processed streams of biological data. "Initial response appears positive," the healer announced carefully. "Bacterial activity is beginning to decrease, and the prince's immune system is showing signs of renewed activity. However, these are very early indicators. We must monitor closely for the next several hours." Emperor Zarthok said nothing, but Marcus could see something shift in the ruler's posture, a slight relaxation that suggested the first faint glimmer of hope. The emperor moved closer to his son's bedside, his massive hand hovering protectively over the young prince's still form. The next few hours passed in a blur of intense monitoring and careful adjustments. Marcus found himself working alongside beings whose medical knowledge spanned millennia, his simple earth training somehow complementing their advanced techniques. He suggested supportive care measures that his grandmother had taught him, while they provided technological capabilities beyond anything he had imagined possible. Dr. Vexhai became his primary collaborator, the crystalline healer's analytical capabilities perfectly suited to monitoring the subtle changes that human medicine produced. Together, they tracked the prince's gradual improvement, adjusting fluid intake and monitoring for side effects that could prove fatal. "His temperature is beginning to normalize," Dr. Vexhai reported after the third hour. "The bacterial infection is responding to the antibiotic, and his immune system is beginning to function normally again." Marcus felt a wave of relief so powerful it nearly buckled his knees. The treatment was working. The simple antibiotics that every human carried were successfully fighting an infection that had baffled the galaxy's most advanced medical minds. But the prince wasn't out of danger yet. Marcus knew from his grandmother's teachings that bacterial infections could resurge if treatment was interrupted too early. The next 24 hours would be critical, requiring constant monitoring and supportive care. "We need to maintain the antibiotic levels," Marcus explained to the assembled medical team. "Earth medicine works over time, building up the body's defenses rather than providing instant cures. The prince will need multiple doses over the next few days, combined with careful nutritional support and rest." Emperor Zarthok finally spoke, his voice carrying a mixture of gratitude and barely controlled emotion. "How long before we know if he will recover completely?" Marcus met the emperor's burning gaze steadily. "If the treatment continues to work as it has so far, he should be conscious within 12 hours and making significant progress within 48 hours. Full recovery will take longer, probably a week or two of careful monitoring and supportive care." For the first time since Marcus had entered the medical wing, Emperor Zarthok's expression showed something other than rage or desperation. The great ruler's features softened almost imperceptibly as he looked down at his son, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the father beneath the imperial facade. "You have given me hope when I had none," the emperor said quietly. "Whatever the outcome, you have my gratitude for trying when others had given up." Dr. Vexhai's crystalline form chimed with what Marcus was learning to recognize as satisfaction. "The human's approach has taught us something valuable about the intersection of simple and advanced medicine. Sometimes the most effective treatment is the one that works with natural processes rather than trying to override them." As the hours passed and the prince's condition continued to improve, Marcus began to understand that he had witnessed something unprecedented. The galaxy's most powerful ruler had been forced to trust the primitive medicine of a species barely advanced enough for space travel, and that trust was being rewarded with his son's life. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus that his grandmother's simple medical wisdom, support the body's natural healing, treat the whole patient rather than just the symptoms, and sometimes the simplest solution is the best solution, had succeeded where the most advanced medical technology in the galaxy had failed. But more than that, he had seen something that few beings in the galaxy would ever witness. The Dragon Emperor not as a terrifying ruler, but as a desperate father willing to try anything to save his child. That moment of vulnerability had created a connection that transcended species boundaries and political hierarchies. 18 hours after the first antibiotic injection, Prince Zeltar opened his eyes. Marcus was adjusting an IV drip when he noticed the young Draconian's golden orbs tracking movement around the room. The moment was so quiet that at first only Marcus realized what had happened. "Your Majesty," Marcus called softly, not wanting to startle anyone but unable to contain his excitement. "The prince is awake." Emperor Zarthok spun around with a speed that belied his massive size. For a moment, father and son simply stared at each other. The young prince's eyes filled with confusion and weakness, but unmistakably aware and alive. The emperor's composure finally cracked completely as he dropped to his knees beside the medical bed. "Zeltar," the emperor whispered, his voice breaking with emotion that Marcus had never imagined possible from the galactic ruler. "My son, can you hear me?" The prince's response was barely audible, but clear enough for everyone in the room to hear. "Father, what happened to me? Why do I feel so weak?" Dr. Vexhai immediately began running diagnostic scans while other medical teams checked vital signs and neurological responses. The results were better than anyone had dared hope. The prince's brain function was normal, his vital signs were stabilizing, and the bacterial infection was in full retreat. "The treatment has been completely successful," Dr. Vexhai announced, the healer's crystalline form pulsing with satisfied light. "All bacterial activity has ceased. The prince's immune system is functioning normally, and there appear to be no lasting effects from the infection." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he watched the reunion between father and son. The young prince was still weak, but his color was returning to normal and his breathing was clear and steady. The simple antibiotics that any human medic would have prescribed had accomplished what the galaxy's most advanced medical technology could not. Emperor Zarthok remained kneeling beside his son's bed, his massive hand gently stroking the young prince's head. When he looked up at Marcus, his eyes held an expression that the human had never seen before in a Draconian, profound gratitude mixed with something that might have been respect. "Human," the emperor said formally, "you have saved my son's life when the greatest healers in the galaxy could not. Name your reward, and if it is within my power to grant, it shall be yours." Marcus felt the weight of everyone's attention as they waited for his response. He could ask for anything: wealth beyond imagination, political power, a position of influence in the galactic government. The Dragon Emperor's gratitude was literally priceless, and Marcus knew that whatever he requested would likely be granted without question. But as he looked at the young prince, still weak but clearly recovering, Marcus realized what he truly wanted from this experience. "Your Majesty, I don't want a reward for myself, but I would like to ask for something that could help prevent this kind of situation in the future." Emperor Zarthok's eyes narrowed slightly, but his tone remained respectful. "Speak your request." Marcus took a deep breath, knowing he was about to make another audacious suggestion. "I would like to establish a medical exchange program between Earth and the Draconian Empire. Human medicine has different approaches that might complement your advanced technology, and our doctors could learn from your healers' techniques. Both species would benefit from sharing knowledge." The request caught everyone off guard. Instead of asking for personal gain, Marcus was proposing something that would benefit both civilizations. Dr. Vexhai chimed with what sounded like approval, while other medical personnel exchanged glances that suggested the idea had merit. "You would share your medical knowledge freely?" the Emperor asked, clearly surprised by the concept. "That's what medicine should be about," Marcus replied, thinking of his grandmother's dedication to helping anyone who needed care. "Healing isn't something that should be hoarded or kept secret. When someone is sick, the only thing that matters is making them better, regardless of what species they are or where the cure comes from." Prince Zeltar's weak voice cut through the conversation. "Father, this human saved my life. If his people's medicine is so effective, shouldn't we learn from them?" Emperor Zarthok looked down at his son, then back at Marcus. The great ruler's expression was thoughtful, and Marcus could almost see him processing the implications of the request. After a long moment, the Emperor nodded slowly. "Your request is granted. I will establish a formal medical exchange program between our civilizations. Human medical personnel will be invited to study in our best facilities, and our healers will travel to Earth to learn your techniques. Both species will be stronger for this collaboration. Dr. Vexhai chimed with obvious excitement. This represents an unprecedented opportunity for medical advancement. The combination of human intuitive approaches and our analytical capabilities could revolutionize treatment protocols throughout the galaxy. As the excitement of the moment began to settle, Marcus found himself reflecting on the incredible journey that had brought him to this point. 3 days ago, he had been an invisible janitor cleaning floors and emptying trash containers. Now he was negotiating medical treaties with the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. But more importantly, he had learned something profound about the nature of healing and cooperation. The galaxy's most advanced civilizations had been so focused on complex high-tech solutions that they had overlooked simpler approaches that might be more effective. Sometimes the best answer came from the most unexpected source. Prince Zeltar was growing stronger by the hour, his recovery progressing exactly as Marcus had predicted based on his grandmother's teachings. The young Draconian was already asking questions about human medicine, curious about the simple treatments that had saved his life when sophisticated technology had failed. "Will you stay to oversee the prince's full recovery?" Emperor Zarthok asked Marcus. "I would prefer to have the architect of his treatment available during the critical period." Marcus nodded, still barely believing that he was having this conversation with the Dragon Emperor. "Of course, Your Majesty. Earth medicine requires patience and careful monitoring, but the prince should be fully recovered within the week." As medical teams began planning the prince's ongoing care, Marcus realized that his life had changed irrevocably. He would never again be an invisible janitor. The human who had saved the Dragon Emperor's son would be remembered throughout galactic history. But more than fame or recognition, Marcus felt the deep satisfaction that came from following his grandmother's teachings and putting healing above everything else. The medical exchange program would be his lasting legacy, a bridge between civilizations that could save countless lives in the future. Sometimes the most important changes began with the simplest acts of compassion, and Marcus had learned that even a janitor could change the galaxy if he was willing to risk everything for what was right. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the gleaming corridors of the newly constructed Human Draconian Medical Research Institute, watching as doctors from Earth worked alongside crystalline healers and ethereal energy manipulators. The facility, built with unprecedented speed by imperial decree, had become the galaxy's premier center for collaborative medical research. Prince Zeltar, now fully recovered and seemingly stronger than ever, had become Marcus's shadow during the construction process. The young Draconian displayed an insatiable curiosity about human medicine and had already mastered basic first aid techniques that combined Earth methods with Draconian physiology. "Marcus," the prince called out, approaching with his characteristic enthusiasm, "Dr. Chen wants to show us the results of the latest bacterial resistance study. The combination of human antibiotics with crystalline enhancement techniques. It is proving more effective than anyone predicted." Marcus smiled as he followed the energetic young prince through corridors that buzzed with activity. The medical exchange program had exceeded everyone's expectations, producing breakthrough treatments that neither species could have developed alone. Human intuition and adaptability combined with draconian analytical precision had created a new paradigm in galactic medicine. Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the first human physicians to participate in the exchange program, greeted them in the main research laboratory. Her easy collaboration with Dr. Vexhai had become the template for successful cross-species medical cooperation. "Marcus, you need to see this," Dr. Chen said, her excitement evident. "We've successfully treated 17 different species using modified human antibiotics, combined with species-specific enhancement techniques. The success rate is 94%, compared to 63% using traditional galactic medicine alone." Dr. Vexhai chimed in with harmonious tones that conveyed deep satisfaction. The human approach of supporting natural healing processes rather than overriding them has proven applicable across multiple species. We have discovered that many conditions previously considered incurable respond well to this gentler methodology. Marcus felt a familiar surge of pride mixed with humility. His grandmother's simple wisdom about working with the body's natural defenses had become the foundation for revolutionary medical advances. But more than the technical achievements, he was proud of the spirit of cooperation that had developed between the species. Emperor Zarthok arrived for his weekly inspection of the facility, his imposing presence immediately commanding attention throughout the laboratory. But Marcus had learned to see beyond the imperial facade to the devoted father who visited regularly to ensure his son's continued health and to support the medical program that had saved the prince's. Report, the emperor commanded, though his tone had warmed considerably in the months since his son's recovery. Dr. Vexhai provided a comprehensive overview of recent achievements, while Dr. Chen demonstrated new treatment protocols that were being adopted throughout the galaxy. The success stories were remarkable. Diseases that had plagued various species for generations were being cured using hybrid approaches that combined human medicine with alien technology. But perhaps the most significant development was the cultural change that had accompanied the medical advances. Species that had previously viewed each other with suspicion or superiority were now collaborating as equals, united by the common goal of healing and the shared recognition that wisdom could come from unexpected sources. The Ethereal Council has requested permission to establish a research station here, Prince Zeltar reported to his father. They want to study how human emotional healing techniques can be enhanced with their energy manipulation abilities. Emperor Zarthok nodded approvingly. Granted. This facility will welcome any species committed to advancing medical knowledge for the benefit of all. The humans' gift to us must be shared throughout the galaxy. Marcus watched as representatives from dozens of species worked together in laboratories that had been designed to accommodate various physiological needs. Aquatic beings worked in specially designed water chambers, while gas-based entities manipulated equipment through containment fields. The diversity was staggering, but the cooperation was genuine. There's something else, Dr. Chen said quietly, approaching Marcus with a data pad. We've received reports from the Outer Rim territories about a plague affecting multiple colony worlds. The symptoms don't match anything in the galactic medical databases, but they're remarkably similar to a condition your grandmother documented in her journals. Marcus felt his pulse quicken as he reviewed the data. The symptoms did indeed match a rare tropical disease that his grandmother had encountered during her early career as a country doctor. She had developed a treatment protocol using local plant extracts combined with supportive care, knowledge that had been dismissed by modern Earth medicine as primitive folk remedies. Can we help them? Marcus asked, already knowing the answer but needing to hear it confirmed. Emperor Zarthok stepped forward, his golden eyes blazing with the same determination Marcus had seen when the prince was dying. We will deploy medical teams immediately. The Outer Rim colonies will not suffer while we possess the knowledge to help them. As preparations began for the medical mission to the Outer Rim, Marcus reflected on how completely his life had changed. The invisible janitor had become one of the galaxy's most respected medical advisors. But more importantly, he had helped create a new model for interspecies cooperation based on mutual respect and shared purpose. Prince Zeltar approached as Marcus prepared to depart with the medical mission. The young Draconian had grown considerably in the past months, both physically and in wisdom, that seemed beyond his years. Thank you, the prince said simply, not just for saving my life, but for showing us that strength comes from working together rather than standing alone. Marcus clasped the young prince's scaled hand in a gesture that had become their customary farewell. Your recovery taught me something too. Sometimes the greatest healing happens when we're willing to trust each other across seemingly impossible differences. As Marcus boarded the medical ship, bound for the Outer Rim, he carried with him not just his grandmother's medical knowledge, but the deeper wisdom she had tried to teach him about the true nature of healing. Medicine wasn't just about curing diseases. It was about building connections, fostering understanding, and recognizing that every species had something valuable to contribute to the greater good. The ship launched into hyperspace, carrying a medical team that represented the best of galactic cooperation. Human doctors worked alongside draconian healers, crystalline analysts, and ethereal energy specialists, all united by the understanding that healing transcended species boundaries. Behind them, the Human Draconian Medical Research Institute continued its work, a permanent symbol of what could be achieved when different species chose cooperation over competition. And in the Imperial Palace, a young prince continued his studies of human medicine. preparing for the day when he would rule with the wisdom that strength and compassion were not opposites, but complementary aspects of true leadership. Marcus smiled as he looked out at the stars, knowing that his grandmother would have been proud of how far her simple teachings had traveled. The galaxy was a little bit smaller, a little bit kinder, and a lot more hopeful because someone had been willing to risk everything to help a sick child, regardless of what species that child happened to be.